Teawinkle Bedtime Stories is based on the real adventures of the Teawinkle farm animals who live with Farmer Willems and his wife on Shamba. Enjoy this celebration of nature and the animal kingdom. Once upon a time in Teawinkle, Farmer Willems and his wife were sitting on their terrace with Genghis and Kali, the savannah-coloured bulbuls. It was a warm spring afternoon, and the two dogs lay sprawled in the sun, enjoying the caress of the warm breeze. Genghis rolled up into a sphinx pose, stretched, and tapped Farmer Willems with his huge lion-like paw. "Tell us a story," he asked lazily. "Yeah," piped up his sister. "Tell us the one about our first day at puppy school." Mrs. Willems laughed and smiled knowingly at her husband. "That is a day we will never forget." Mr. and Mrs. Peacock, who were busy grooming themselves on the lawn, exchanged curious glances and sidled closer to hear the story. "You were 3 months old," started Farmer Willems, "and we got Kali a red lead and Genghis a blue lead that you both liked to chew." The dogs looked at each other and giggled. "Back then you were small enough to lift into the car, but Genghis hated being in the old Jeep. He shook with fear and snuggled against you for comfort, Kali." Genghis sat up straight, puffed out his muscular chest, and rolled his eyes. "I wasn't scared." "When we got to puppy school, you both refused to come out of the car," continued Mrs. Willems and chuckled. "We had to climb into the boot, drag you out, and carry you to school, with all the other puppies watching with big eyes." Jip, the plump grey and white cat who had been listening from under the rosemary bush, shook her head and muttered, "Ugh, those dogs are such babies." "You were both superglued to each other, and when the trainer made us separate you, you yapped like crazy little monsters and drove everyone mad." The dog twins rolled on their backs and laughed. "We were so naughty." "And then," Farmer Willems added, "you got so worked up that you had an upset tummy all down my leg and into my shoe." Kali grimaced. "Yuck! You are so gross, Genghis." Mr. and Mrs. Peacock ruffled their beautiful feathers in disgust. Mrs. Willems patted the frowning dog on his broad shoulder and said, "You were a young, insecure puppy then, and look at you now." Genghis nodded and smiled proudly. "It wasn't easy, but you went to school and step by step you made progress." Suddenly, a hysterical, high-pitched yapping came from the street in front of the farmhouse. It was Gustav, the black and white cocker spaniel, up on his hind legs, dragging Mrs. Lavender the neighbour down the road on his lead. It was always the same. Gustav barked at everyone and everything he passed. "Gustav!" shrieked Mrs. Lavender. "Gustav! Will you stop it? Gustav Lavender! I'm warning you! Gustav! No! No! Gustav!" Genghis and Kali exchanged startled glances. "He probably never went to school and doesn't know how to behave properly." Mrs. Willems nodded. "Many dogs don't, and then the poor things get shouted at by their owners, who also don't know what they're doing. Gustav's busy barking at everything because he sees it as a threat and is afraid. And as for Mrs. Lavender," she rolled her eyes, "she hasn't got a clue." "Poor Gustav," sighed Kali. "He's so confused. He doesn't know what to do. Can we help him? Please let's try." pondered Mrs. Willems. I suppose I could help them both and recommend our dog school to Mrs. Lavender. Yes, that's what I'll do. Because you know what, pups? It's never too late. Even old dogs can learn new tricks. What a day! It's bedtime now for the Teawinkle animals on Shamba. Sleep tight, sweet dreams, and see you soon.